Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. This class is, of course, in the merit of all the Jewish people, especially those in the land of Israel, those that need protection, those that need healing, those that need rescuing. God should give them everything that they need. Okay. If you would like to sponsor a class, sponsorship opportunities are available. Helps us continue these classes. And if you have any questions or comments during the class, please put it in the comments, and we will get to it when we get to it. And this week's Torah portion is Parsha B'Shalach, discusses the Jewish people after the actual Exodus. The actual Exodus happened in last week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion, Jewish people are, after they left Egypt, they're eventually pursued by the Egyptians, the splitting of the Red Sea. And the next week's Torah portion begins, the Jewish people come to Mount Sinai and they receive the Torah. However, there's one part of the Torah portion between the splitting of the sea and the giving of the Torah. And that is 1 month after the giving of the after the Exodus, the Jewish people ran out of food. And they complained to Moses, what are we going to eat? Let's see in Exodus chapter 16. They journeyed from Elim, and the entire community of Israel came from the desert of Sin, which lies between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after the departure from the land of Egypt. The entire community of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the desert. Children of Israel said to them, if only we had died by the hands of God in the land of Egypt, and we sat by pots of meat and ate bread to our fill. For you have brought us into this desert to starve the entire congregation to death. So, of course, Jews, they don't have food for 5 minutes. They start to complain. And they say, look, in Egypt it was wonderful. Why'd you bring us here? We're going to all starve. So God says to Moses, behold, I'm going to rain down bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather what is needed for the day so that I can test them. Whether or not they will follow my teaching on the sixth day, when they prepare for what they bring, it will be double, and they will gather every other day. So they're taught, the Jewish people, that every day they're going to get one portion of bread from heaven. And on Friday, they're going to get double portion because it's forbidden to collect the bread on Shabbos. So that is and the Jewish people ate, that's what they ate for the next 40 years, they ate the manna. And what's interesting about this idea is we see in the Medrash, as quoted by some of the later commentaries, says that it's specific that the Torah is we all know the Torah is not necessarily chronologically in order, and that the Torah describes the reason why the Torah describes this particular thing between the Exodus and the giving of the Torah is because the Torah was only given to those who ate the manna, only the people who ate the manna, or ate the manna in Hebrew. And so we'll read inside in the Mechilta. Mechilta says, that's the commentary on the book of Shemais, the book of Exodus, where there are many Agadic teachings, which we'll discuss later what that means exactly, and also halachic laws expounded in there. It says as follows: the Torah was only given to the eaters of the manna to expound. And the Baal HaTurim says that it says, God says, I will test them. He says, the God says, I'm going to test the Jewish people when they get the manna, whether they will follow my teachings. And he explains, the Baal HaTurim learns from that teaching, from that verse, that the Torah was only given to the eaters of the manna. In other words, that specifically in order they should follow the teachings, teaches us that the Torah was given specifically, the manna was given specifically in order that Jewish people could accept the Torah. And the Seforno similarly says the same thing. The Torah was only given to the people who ate the manna. So we see here that there's a very specific connection between the people eating the manna and the giving of the Torah. So the Rabbi asked a very interesting question. What is this all about? So we know that in the desert, the Jewish people did not have to make a living. Manna came from heaven. Their clothes grew with them. They had laundry done by the clouds of glory. They had water from the well of Miriam. And they didn't really have to do anything. So therefore, what this idea is teaching us that the only way that a Jewish person could be successful in the study of Torah is somebody who has no other obligations. And specifically, those people were given the manna. The Torah was only given to the people who ate the manna because it was teaching us that if you want to study Torah, you have to be able to um, uh, um, have no other obligations, no other distractions. However, we know that the obligation to study Torah applies to every single Jew, whether they're poor, whether they're strong, weak, young, old, doesn't matter. Everybody has an obligation to study Torah. The only difference is how much Torah you have to study. If you have to make a living, then the obligation is the Mishnah says, and it's quoted in the laws of studying of Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, that you suffice with studying 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, or more specifically, 1 chapter in the morning, 1 chapter in the evening, because that's what you're able to do. But somebody who is able to in yeshiva, or they're young and they don't have kids yet, and they're able to suffice with less, they have an obligation to study, as it says, day and night. So seemingly the Torah, how could the Torah say that? How can we say the Torah was only given to the people who ate the manna, which are, first of all, that was one generation, obviously. But even if we say that bringing it out to over time, where only people who don't have obligations, first of all, most people don't even have that for the whole life. Maybe they have it for a portion of life when they're young, or they're retired maybe. But most people over their whole life don't have such an opportunity. And on the contrary, the Torah tells us that they do suffice with learning that a little bit in the morning, a little in the evening. And not only that, we see a very interesting story in the Talmud in Yoma, page 35b, the story of Hillel. So the story goes as follows. The Talmud tells us that Hillel was then a young man, and the study hall would charge to enter. I guess they didn't want people to come and just hang out in the study hall. So therefore they charged an entry fee. And Hillel the elder, then he was young, but he was known as later as Hillel the elder. Every day he would work by chopping wood, and apparently he would spend half of the money that he earned every day. He would spend on entering the study hall. One time, he wasn't able to make a living. Apparently, it was very cold, and he couldn't chop wood or whatever it was. He couldn't find people to buy his wood, and therefore he didn't have the money to pay the entrance fee to the study hall. So the Talmud describes how he goes to the guard, and the guard says no entry. And he was desperate to study Torah, so he goes onto the roof. They had a skylight. In those days, there was no electricity. Obviously, we're talking over 2,000 years ago. So there's no electricity. So they used, candles and natural light during the day. They had a skylight. So he figured he could stand on the roof, listen and see everything that's going on, and he could listen through the skylight. And that the next morning there was a lot of snow, and the rabbis, these are the leaders of the generation, Shmai and Avtalion, the famous leaders of the Jewish people, they came to the study hall, and they see that it's dark, and they look on the roof and they see a body up there, and they said they ran up to the roof, and the Talmud says they removed 3 cubits of snow, which generally speaking, whenever the Talmud uses the word 3, means exaggeration. But there was a lot of snow. Okay, he was covered in snow. They removed the snow. They revived him. They brought him inside, and they said that this person is worthy to desecrate the Shabbos for. Obviously, warming up a fire on Shabbos would be. They washed him and whatever else they had to do. Obviously, it was a violation of Shabbos to save a life. But they said, this person, obviously, the fact that he risked his life to study Torah, we see that obviously it was worth it for us. So what does the Talmud say? What is the lesson from the story? That no amount of poverty could deter you from Torah study. So in fact, the Talmud says that after a person passes away, they're going to ask you a lot of questions. When a poor person comes, they're going to ask him, did you study Torah? And if you say, I was too poor, then they're going to say, were you poorer than Hillel? So they say Hillel incriminates the poor. That's the expression from the Talmud. So we see here that on the contrary, Hillel he ended up becoming the leader of the next generation, that Hillel was extremely poor. He was not from the eaters of the manna, so to speak. He didn't have, he had to make a living. And nonetheless, we see how much he risked his life for Torah. And on the other hand, we see this idea that only the eaters of the manna, only people who ate the manna were worthy of receiving the Torah. Now, the truth is, this is debated in the Talmud in Tractate Brachas, page 35b. This is debated between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Yishmael says, I'll read a little bit, an excerpt of this Talmud passage. It says, what is the meaning of the verse, and you shall gather your grain? Because it says, this Torah shall not depart from your mouth, and you shall contemplate it day and night. I might have thought these matters are to be understood as they are written. One is to literally spend his days immersed exclusively in Torah study. Therefore, the verse states, and you shall gather your grain, your wine, and your oil. Assume in their regard the way of the world. Set aside time not only for Torah, but also for work. And this is Rabbi Yishmael's statement. So Rabbi Yishmael says, the Torah says that you should study Torah day and night, and the Torah says, and you shall gather your grain. So we see from here that it's not meant to be taken literally, and a person is supposed to actually be involved in the world in making a living. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, is it possible that a person plows in the plowing season, sows in the sowing season, harvests in the harvest season, and threshes in the threshing season, and winnows in the windy season, and as the grain is separated by chaff by means of the wind, and is constantly busy, what will become of the Torah? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai totally disagrees. He says farming, which was the majority of the world's economy back then, if a person is constantly busy during every season, has its challenges of winnowing and harvesting and sowing and plowing, all these different seasons that a farmer goes through. Farmers are extremely busy people. How is it possible that a person is going to be studying Torah? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai continues, rather, one must dedicate himself exclusively to Torah at the expense of other endeavors. When Israel performs God's will, their work is performed by others. As it is stated, and strangers will stand and feed your flocks, and foreigners will be the plowmen and your vine dressers. So we see that he quotes a verse from Isaiah and verses from Deuteronomy that essentially prove, according to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, prove that if we actually dedicate ourselves to the Torah, then we won't have to worry about making a living. So this is really a debate between Rabbi Yishmael, who says, no, a person is supposed to be involved in the world, whereas Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying a person should not be involved in the world and focus exclusively on Torah. Now, Abaya was a sage in a later generation. He summed it up as follows. Although there is room for both opinions, many have acted in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael and combined working for a living and learning Torah. Although they engaged in activities other than the study of Torah, they were successful in their Torah study. So Rabbi Abaya says, we see that people are very successful in making a living and studying Torah, and they are successful in Torah study. Many have acted in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they were not successful in the Torah study. So Abaya says that majority of people should follow the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. So we see, and this is the law. And this is not we talked a little bit earlier, an agada teaching. Agada means a teaching that is not necessarily binding in law. So sometimes we expound on a verse in a way that teaches us a lesson. That's generally what agada is. So we expound on a verse that teaches us a lesson, but not necessarily in a way that teaches us the law. We can't say that because, first of all, this is quoted by Abaya. We see clearly the Talmud says that this is the law, that a person has to follow Rabbi Yishmael. And this, not only that, it's quoted in the Mechilta, that it's quoted in the Mechilta as which is a book of laws based on the Torah. So, and not only that, let's go back a second. That original, we can even see that this is a consistent opinion, because the Mechilta that we quoted earlier, that the manna was only given to the people who the Torah was only given to the people who ate the manna, that is quoted in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So we see that this is a consistent idea brought both in the Talmud and in Mechilta, which are again both books of laws, and we see Rabbi viewed it as a binding law. So this is a binding law that a person that seemingly that Abaya says that it's he ends up saying that it's mostly not like that, right? We don't follow Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but the fact that it's in the Mechilta shows that there is room for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and even Abaya says that there's room for both opinions. So how is it possible to say that this is that for regular people, that regular people are able to? Shouldn't regular people be able to study the Torah? So, if we could explain all this by there's a teaching in the Talmud in the Avodah Zarah, page 19 a. In the Talmud in Avodah Zarah says that the Torah is called God's Torah. However, if a person studies the Torah and he really understands it well and he acquires it, it's called his Torah. And they bring a verse. The verse says in Tehillim, "B'Torah Hashem Chavsai, u'b'Torasa Yega Yom V'Layla," that in the Torah of God is his desire or his delight. And then the verse continues, and in his Torah he meditates day and night. In other words, that we see that if a person really applies himself, he could actually make the Torah his. So now, maybe based on this, we can understand the difference between the way of Rabbi Yishmael and the way of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Yishmael is saying, if you want to study Torah, it's very possible to study Torah and make a living, and that is as is explicit in the Code of Jewish Law. You can learn in the morning, you learn in the evening. But if a person wants to make the Torah his, what does that Mechil to say? What did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai say over there? That he says the Torah was only given, in other words, it was given over that it could become yours. Only that was given to people who totally have no other distractions and put everything aside and have no other obligations. So if you want the Torah to be truly yours, then you have to be a person totally dedicated with no other distractions. And this is also in the Talmud in Eruvin as well, page 65. The Talmud says that Abaya said once that if my stepmother were to ask me to bring her a dish of food, I would not be able to study Torah. In other words, he was saying that if I'm going to be distracted by other things, even a small thing as passing, a dish or making her a lunch, that's it. He can't handle that, and he wouldn't be able to study Torah at the level that he usually does. So we see that Abaya, who was half of the Talmud is the discussions of Abaya and Rava, who was one of the premier sages of the Talmud. In order for him to study Torah on his level, we see that that you can't have any distractions. Now, the question is, how is that possible? That how is it possible that that every single person can do this? And we'll see even further that there is a we'll see in a second. There's even a further thing about how we're supposed to study Torah. The Talmud explains that a person, the Talmud teaches us in Masechtas Brachos, I don't have the page number here, in Masechtas Brachos, that just as the original giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai was with reverence, awe, and trembling, so too in every generation the Torah must be studied with a sense of reverence, awe, and trembling. So the Alter Rebbe, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, by the way, if you want to learn more about these Jewish personalities that we're discussing today, please check out our Tuesday class. And if you're from our Tuesday class coming to our Thursday class, welcome. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad, has a very simple question. How is it possible to study Torah on the level of Mount Sinai when the Torah was given? It was with fear and awe. Well, of course it was fear and awe. There was thunder, there was lightning. They saw the sounds. They saw the thunder, and they heard the lightning. and they saw a revelation of God. Of course, they were. How is it possible for a person studying Torah? How is it possible for him to get to such a level when he's not experiencing that? And he explains that if a Jew realizes that when they are studying Torah, that God is sitting across from him, and he's actually re-experiencing Sinai, he will come to that. In other words, that the truth is, every single time we study Torah, we are on the level of Sinai. So again, but the same problem is that the only way we're able to experience this is through complete dedication. We have to have no distractions. We can't be like, well, I just have 5 minutes, let me study Torah. No, studying Torah, we need to really understand when we're studying Torah that God is sitting across from us the same way he was when we got to Torah on Mount Sinai. So seemingly this does not seem very practical for the average person, as we explained previously. So whether it's the issue of the reverence of Torah or the ability to acquire Torah, it does not seem possible. So here the Rabbi takes this whole idea to a new level, and he points out something very fascinating. Question is, we discussed previously in the beginning of this class that the Jewish people in the generation of the desert had a lot of things taken care for them. That they were taking care. Let me say that, see if I get that out. There were many things that were taken care of for them. They didn't have to worry about clothes that grew with them. They didn't have to worry about water, it came from the well of Miriam. They didn't have to worry about laundry. They walked through the clouds of glory, and the laundry would be done. They would the clouds of glory would also clean when they were leaving. It would clean up behind them. So they didn't have to do all these things. So the question is, why does the Mechilta that we're discussing and the later commentaries, none of them say the generation that had the clouds of glory, the generation that had the waters of Miriam? Why is it specific the generation that had the manna? And the Rebbe points out that the manna had a unique quality that the other things didn't have. The other miracles that we discussed happened once. For example, the water of Miriam happened once until she passed away. Then the water came because of Moses. But at any rate, it would happen once that they got the water, and that was it. The water was there. They didn't have to worry about the water anymore. Same thing with clothes. The clothes constantly grew with them. They didn't have to worry about it anymore. They knew that they had the clouds of glory, and they could walk through the clouds of glory whenever they needed, and they would get their clothes cleaned. They never had to worry about those things again. But the manna didn't just like there was a manna storehouse they could go in whenever. The manna, every single morning, there would be a new fresh manna. They only were able to take enough for that day. If they did take more, then it would rot. And so they had to put their trust in God. And they had to, they weren't able to, and in a way, they actually says they were always hungry because psychologically, a person, when he knows that he has food tomorrow, it's kind of satiates him. You're not like rushing, like, oh my gosh, where is there going to be food tomorrow? So people who don't, God forbid, people who don't have food security, it's a big problem, and they're always hungry. And some of the Jewish people, it says that they were always hungry because they quote unquote didn't know where the food was coming from tomorrow. So the truth is that the manna had not only, it wasn't just about the fact that the Jewish people ate the manna, wasn't about the fact that all their needs were taken care of. It also showed that they had to put their trust in God. And when they were able to do that, when they were able to put their trust in God, that's when they were able to study the best. And therefore, in other words, they not only that they didn't have to worry about making a livelihood, they had to totally put their trust in God. And this teaches us that every single person, even people who make a living, even people who study Torah not full time, as most of us do, when we do have those few minutes that we do study Torah, those few hours that we study Torah, it has to be in that way where we totally put our faith in God that everything is going to be taken care of. We know that our livelihood is going to be taken care of, and therefore, these few minutes that we're studying Torah, nothing can distract us. And in fact, the Rebbe in the I believe this is the 1960s, actually 1970s, the Rebbe discussed the fact that during our Torah study sessions, we can't answer the phone. Now, today it almost seems prophetic, because back In the 1970s, your phone would ring. It wasn't as constant as it is today. Today, you can't just not answer the phone. You can't have your phone near you. You have to put it on silent. Otherwise, you'll be totally distracted. So the Rebbe is teaching us that, in fact, we can study Torah in the way of the people who ate the manna. The way the manna studied Torah was that they had to put their faith in God. They had to put their faith in God that everything was taken care of. They couldn't just say, it wasn't that everything was actually, that they could see with their own eyes, everything was taken care of. The same thing applies to us. The few minutes that we're studying Torah, we can't be distracted by people, by technology, by whatever worries that we have. We have to put our faith in God and trust in God and know that these few minutes that we have, these few hours that we have in the day that we study Torah are totally dedicated to God without any distraction. And if we do that, the Torah can become part of us, and to the point that it can become your Torah, not just God's Torah, but your Torah. And the Torah will be given to you, just like it was given to the sages of the previous generations. Thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. If you have any questions, comments, please put it in the comment section. We appreciate it. And we'll see you, God willing, next week.